Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Wilkes. We haven't met before. I'm the program manager at the TomTom Foundation. And on behalf of our board and our team, I just want to thank each of you for being here with us today. Today's event is part of a 7-week virtual event series called the Cities Rising Summit. All Cities Rising events will be available on a pay-what-you-can scale, thanks to the support of our sponsors and community members like you. So if today's program resonates with you, we'd ask you to please consider becoming a contributing member to the foundation. You can do so on our website, tomtomfoundation.org/give. The title of today's talk is Divine Rising Angels, What We Can All Learn from Ballroom. And we are incredibly excited to feature Twiggy Pucci Garçon, who is a filmmaker, runway consultant for Pose on FX, as well as the chief program officer, excuse me, at True Colors United, a nonprofit supporting LGBTQ youth who are experiencing homelessness. This event is part of a thematic week of programs focused on the arts and is brought to you by the Elizabeth Graham Firestone Foundation, who we thank for their incredible support. With that, I'm pleased to introduce you to our moderator for today, our friend Krista Bradley, who is the Director of Programs and Resources at the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. Is a real luminary in the arts world. We're so happy to have her. Krista, I will turn it over to you.
Hi there. Sorry, there's a glitch on my end. Can you all see me and hear me now?
We can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, everyone. I'm so sorry for the delay. I'm Krista Bradley. My personal pronouns are she, her, hers. And for those who might have low visibility, I just want to model and share that I am a Black woman, brown skin. I'm wearing clear glasses. I am wearing a speckled shirt, and we're here to have some great conversations about advocacy, activism, and leadership in the arts. And I am so thrilled and honored to be able to have a conversation with Twiggy Pucci Garçon, who is a wonderful leader in the field, choreographer, consultant for one of my favorite shows, Pose. Also a leader in activism around homelessness, LGBTQ youth. And we're here to talk about advocacy. That's what the category is today. So welcome, Twiggy. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you also. Also for those who are in our audience, I use she, her, they, and them pronouns. And for those with low visibility, I am brown skin, queer, non-binary. I have on a black jacket with red and white accents, and I have locks.
And very nice locks, I would add. Great. So Twiggy, when we were talking before all this, I was realizing that we had a shared history in terms of a place where we grew up. And that's Hampton Roads in Tidewater, Virginia. And I know that there was a very special art center there that played a role in your journey. Can you just take me back to where and how you grew up and how being involved in that arts community in Portsmouth informed your own journey as an artist and activist?
Yeah, absolutely. Shout outs to the 757 Hampton Roads, Tidewater, Portsmouth, P-Town. I was born and raised in Portsmouth, Virginia, to African-American and Indigenous parents on both sides. I grew up in a bunch of different areas. We moved around a lot, but from Mount Herman to Churchland to Cavalier Manor, all over Portsmouth. And I grew up deeply involved and rooted in the Black Christian Church. I went to Noble Street Baptist Church in Portsmouth. You know, as a part of my sort of spiritual and artistic journey, I grew up in sort of doing a little bit of everything in church. I was a junior missionary, I was a junior usher, I was on the youth choir. I started my church's Mind ministry. I was probably the only Mask of Sin person on the dance team. And that led me to, that was one of the reasons that I joined Gail Hart's dance studio in Portsmouth. The other is right around early high school, I want to say my freshman year, I was sort of recruited by a person who I went to high school with, who not only danced at Gail Hart's, but was one of the only openly queer folks in my high school, and also was a person who invited me to Ballroom. And his name is Sharad, Ms. Rahim. And so I started out at Gail Hart's, yeah, at a young age, and I was given an ultimatum when I was younger at my church around, you know, my masculinity and my femininity and sexuality, and chose to leave. And then Ballroom became my ministry. Little did I know then. And it became the place that, you know, helped me to find my voice, helped me to figure out who I am and how I show up in the world, and you know, sort of sort through my identities and how I can give back to my community and other communities. All of that happened in Ballroom. And so those are the early beginnings.
Yeah, it's important to, I'm glad that you took us through that, because I think one of the themes that I keep reading about in terms of Ballroom and its origins, you know, coming out of the Harlem Renaissance, and as a result of homophobia and transphobia, to try to create a safe space where people could be their own and full selves. And I think that's a kind of a theme that I want to weave through this, because it seems like you've really led trying to create safe spaces in your life. And those safe spaces have allowed you to, and others, to sort of reach really great, true selves. And so thank you for that. Tell us about your experience on the set of Pose. I know that everyone's wanting me to sort of go there. As a choreographer and consultant, what are some of the ways you're able to bring authenticity to the presentation of ballroom culture?
Yeah, I think that started at the very beginning with my work on the project, which was way before anything on set. In 2017, I saw the Deadline announcement that Stephen Canals will be working with Ryan to create Pose, to co-create Pose. And I was extremely excited because I love Ryan's work, and extremely excited to learn that Stephen is an Afro-Latinx queer person from the Bronx, so like from New York, and, you know, familiar with the community. But I was curious about who from the ballroom scene was going to work on the show and how they were going to get it right. And so I literally just said that in a post on Facebook. And, you know, social media, and apparently back to their team through some friends of mine. Shout outs to Trace Lissette, shout outs to Silas Howard. And it couldn't have been 48 hours before I was on the phone with people from Ryan's team. And so I was leaving the country to go present my film Kiki at a film festival, but also to teach ballroom history and runway in The Hague in the Netherlands. And so they asked me, could I come out to LA? I'm like, yes, the moment I'm back. And as soon as I flew back from The Hague, I flew to LA and met with Ryan. And it was just totally unexpected. Like I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. Like I thought that maybe it would be like a job interview, or, you know, I had no idea what to expect. And while I've worked in doc through Kiki, and you know, done a lot of consulting and worked through the organization that I sit on the board of, Doc Society, I hadn't at that time done anything in TV, especially like on that level. And so the conversation really was with Mr. Murphy and some of the other executive producers, and really was, you know, him telling me what he wanted to do and how he wanted to get it right, and asking me what it means for me as a person in the ballroom to get it right. And, you know, and the conversation was just amazing. I mean, I thought, you know, 15, 20-minute conversation was over an hour, and which, you know, led to him asking me to be a consultant on season 1. And so, you know, deals, contracts, all that stuff aside, working on the set of season 1 was really like, you know, in and out of the writer's room to get feedback on the categories, on the, you know, storylines, all of it, and being on set to, you know, make sure that how we were representing ballroom is how ballroom would be. From the casting of background to even some of the leads, Dominique who plays Electra, who's my gay mother, is an icon in the ballroom scene for over, 2 decades. Haley, who plays Lulu, was Mother Rodeo in California. India is still, I believe, in the House of Extravaganza. So like, these are people from, little do a lot of people know, these are all people from the ballroom scene. Most, if not all, the judges and the people who you see actually walk the categories are either in the ballroom scene or affiliated with the ballroom scene. And I would say a large part of the background is also ballroom. And so, and that's just like what you see on camera. Behind the camera, there's, Naomi Maldonado, who we know is like the Wonder Woman of Vogue, who also choreographs and plays a character on the show. We have Genovia Chase, who's a ballroom coordinator. We have all sorts of consultants and folks on, from hair to makeup to, pretty much built throughout the entirety of how the show happens, that are from the scene. And so it's virtually impossible not to get it right when you are that intentional.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. And that's an amazing story just about leadership and authenticity. Nothing for us without us. It's a really good example of that. Was Ryan already wanting to do that? I mean, or was part of your involvement influential in terms of the stories and connecting, the production team to the community that you know?
Oh yeah. I sent lists and spreadsheets of like folks, and I wasn't the only one, so I can't take the credit alone. Like, there, particularly season 1, there was a team of consultants who were all legends and icons from the ballroom scene. My father, Michael Robertson, Jose Extravaganza, rest in peace, my grandfather, Hector Extravaganza, who's passed since then. Sob and Davis. There were many consultants that all sort of did that, like told stories and connected them to folks, and we're on set as either like creative consultants or on set in front of the camera. Folks who aren't familiar with ballroom may not know that that's who those folks are. But yeah, all ballroom, all the way around.
That's great. How do those strategies and the things that you all modeled with the show relate to the presentation of Black and LGBTQ stories in other art spaces? What could you tease out or recommend for people that are wanting to get it right and be allies in whatever spaces they're using to raise up stories creatively in other venues?
I mean, I think the first thing is that we proved it's possible. This was the largest LGBTQ cast, I believe, in television history. And the reason we got it right is because it's possible. You don't have to choose to have folks who are not a part of a community telling the story. You can choose folks from the community to be a part of telling the story. You can make space for them as consultants. And even, to be honest, beyond that, right? Like, we have the skill set to produce, we have the skill set to write, we have the skill set to direct, we have the skill set, to be all around collaborators. And so, I mean, it really is simple. The teasing out of it is do it, right? Like, it's not impossible. And the only thing that would make it impossible is sort of self-inflicted bureaucracy and self-inflicted, BS, if I'm being honest. Like, folks have made the choice over the years to not include the communities that are the centerpiece of the story or centerpiece of the work being done, whether that's an advocacy front or the entertainment front. And that's honestly just been a choice. And so choose differently.
Exactly. In the world that I'm in with live performing arts, there's a reckoning happening right now with people calling in and calling out folks for not doing that work and not involving and making space and centering leadership by and for Black and brown artists. So that centering of leadership is really important. And thank you for hitting that.
Yeah, I think mentoring is happening in both, TV and film. That reckoning that you mentioned is happening in TV and film. But I'm excited to hear that it's happening in both live performance as well. I am potentially going to be entering that world soon. Yeah.
Do tell.
I mean,
you can.
What I would say is that it's a, BIPOC queer take on an extremely popular theater story that I've been recently asked to choreograph. So
fabulous. Okay.
Official, but yeah, super excited.
You heard it here first, people.
Really? Yeah.
So Poe centers the stories of LGBTQ youth, many BIPOC, and you shared with your work at True Colors United, that organization also centers LGBTQ youth and their experience, particularly around homelessness. Can you give us a sense of, like, between your work with Pose and True Colors and the way that both do business in centering leadership, what we might be able to learn from that in the arts? You know, what does it mean to have inclusive leadership? What does it mean to create space? And maybe even get out of the way, you know, particularly with True Colors. I know a lot of youth are sort of being supported to be leaders, but what are some insights that you might share?
I mean, getting out of the way, it sort of requires one to do the internal work first in their person. And so, you know, there's no way to sort of like make space efficiently and like make room for leadership within either art or entertainment or advocacy without doing the work first. Like it's not going to work with you simply stepping aside. Like you have to do very deep internal work to sort of understand at the ideological and theoretical level of like oppression, right? Like there's internalized oppression, there's interpersonal oppression, there's institutional oppression. Like you have to like learn through all of that and learn through, you know, what it means what racism actually is, and like how, you know, through all those levels, how it has, you know, how it got to be institutionalized, why we're here. Like you need to know that in order to step aside or to get out of the way or to make space. Like you have to do some deep internal work, whether that's bringing in, you know, racial equity consultants or trainers, and not just for your staff, for your leaders, for your board, which is what we have and are doing at True Colors United. And so, you know, it started with, for us at least, like the internal work, the personal work, the staff work of really truly knowing what it means to work through a racial equity lens. And we couldn't do anything to change our programs or change the way that we are in the world without doing that first. So that's the first step. And to be patient with yourself, right? Like you are decolonizing your mind, you are unlearning problematic things that have been deeply rooted in your thoughts and the way you see yourself and the way you see the world. That's not an overnight process. And so it, you know, I overemphasize that it's about you. It is about your journey. It is about your way of thinking, the way you see yourself, the way you see the world. And that is, and that in and of itself is a journey. So start with you, do the research, do the studying, get the training, read the books, watch the YouTube, do all of it, do it all as an individual. And then at the organizational and staff and leadership level, do it there too, because that's where it starts.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was just on another panel yesterday, and you could have been on the exact same one because they were saying the same things. It's like, do the work first, you know, and so many, at least in the live arts world, are sort of, you know, the alarms going off. It's like, oh my gosh, we need help. We need a racial equity person to come in and fix this. And we were talking about how that's not, this is not an alarm. It's been going on for centuries, and our emergency is not yours. However, how do we sort of work together to help you unpack, you know, and do the work? And there was a lot of, I don't know if you experienced this as a leader and equity consultant, and you know, there's a sense of tiredness, you know, among the leaders and trainers, and not wanting to have to train you and go through all of that. Do you experience that? Does your team experience that? And how are you doing?
I mean, you know, doing this work is extremely exhausting, and one, you know, not just me, but colleagues, friends get burnt out very easily. Just imagine, you know, not even imagine, you're a Black woman, so you don't need to imagine. But the to bear the weight of like just being Black in America, like waking up, walking out the door, and never knowing what could happen simply because you're Black, and then layer that with other identities and your presentation and all those sorts of things, right? And then layer that with the expectation of folks that you train them to unpack their problematic stuff. Like it's just weight upon weight upon weight. Like the burden of all of that is exhausting. And so right now I'm in a good place. Thank you for asking. I'm not always in a great place. And very often I have to just sort of completely unplug, like no social media, no emails, no phone, no anything, just to pour back into myself and or surround myself with folks that pour into me. And I think, you know, normalizing that is okay. Like we have an extremely fluid self-care policy at True Colors, at least specifically, where like we're going through an unprecedented time with this political state, this, you know, socio-political state, this economic state, this pandemic state, and, you know, our work is heavy in and of itself. And so, you know, when folks need to take time, they just take time. Like, if you just need to take care of yourself, do it. And so, you know, and that goes for all of our staff, but I say that even more specifically for those of us who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, all of those who are identities sort of, not sort of, but, you know, exist in the margins, that this is even heavier. And so, you know, prioritizing self-care on a daily, on an hourly, is how we're approaching the work and approaching how we take care of ourselves and of our staff, and how I would encourage folks in all, you know, sort of lanes, whether it's entertainment or advocacy, you know, as much as you can. It's a lot different being on set. You can't just be like, oh, you know, but in spaces where you can do that.
Yeah, that self-care piece is so important, and it sounds like that spiritual healing component of your life has really sustained you. I didn't realize that was also some of the work that you're doing. Do you want to talk about any of that here? I mean, I was curious about what.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work in the sort of healing and restorative justice spaces, just around. I mean, I consider myself a spiritualist. I practice a number of things, mostly rooted in sort of African traditional religions. But it is about, without getting into specifics, it really is about creating like healing space, and that can look a bunch of different ways. Healing space can be as simple as folks loving on each other and pouring into each other over a meal. It can look like very intentional, you know, sort of activities around release and healing in that way. Writing letters to those who have hurt us, and that sort of thing, you know, that sort of thing. And so I've done enough, you know, that facilitating those sorts of spaces since I was a child, I feel like, at this point. So, and it's just innate. It's just a part of who I believe I am, and a part of why I believe I exist in the world. So
thank you for that. Thanks for that inspiration too. I think so many of us, particularly at this time, can learn from being a leader to try to create that kind of safe space, healing space, particularly in these times. Let's get back to the ballroom community a little bit, because I know that some people want to talk about that. I mean, I would like to answer this question, but I don't want to hear, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. What about the ballroom community makes it so unique? Like what?
Everything.
I was going to say, right? Everything. But what just can you, for people maybe that are not as familiar, or think they don't know as much, what would you say?
I mean, the inception, the reason, the everything about it, right? Like this idea that Black and Brown, queer and trans folks, like in resistance to oppression, created a space for themselves that has not only survived, but thrived for over a century. You know, so it is a place and the origin of so many things that exist now that little do people know. You know what I mean? Like, one, it was, you know, we made the space for ourselves. So that just, let's just start there, right? Inception.
Yes.
And it's existed for over a century, as I've said, that. This, that, you know, mutual aid, something that we constantly, you know, hear about in advocacy, is something that I won't say we invented in Ballroom, but like we've been doing that from the beginning. That's one of the sort of core tenets, you know what I mean? In the homelessness space, host homes is this sort of newer model, quote unquote. In the homelessness space, especially youth and family homelessness space, we've been doing that from the beginning, right? And so, you know, everyone has this huge fascination, thanks to Kiki and My House and Pose and Paris is Burning and all, and you know, and all these projects with the art of voguing. But let's talk about the vernacular, the language, all of the words that folks with, you know, all this personality and all these followers on social media, shade and tea and all of those things, all of this comes from work and serve. All of that, right. Is all origins in Ballroom. And so like we have just constantly created and recreated and evolved. And that is what fascinates me most about Ballroom. We are constantly reinventing ourselves over and over again. Yeah, nobody can do it like us.
No. Any story, well, you already talked about this, stories of resilience. And I mean, just the history is amazing. For people that don't know, how would you define mutual aid?
You know, when a group of people who are in community with one another, when one part of the community or a person in the community has less, other folks in the community who have more simply give, right? Like, and it just is a cycle of giving to make sure that everyone has what they need. So I'll give an example. When COVID first hit, My House created a mutual aid fund where those of us who were able to gave, and those of us in the house who needed, because they either lost their job or got COVID or whatever the case was, received. And so, you know, we made a survey. Well, we collected donations first, and then we made a survey about like, do you need aid for food? Do you need aid for housing? Do you need aid for, like, what do you need it for? And then distributed it accordingly. And we're still doing that. And so that's what mutual aid is.
What we can all learn from that, particularly in the philanthropy world right now, which some of it's happening. You know, those of you that are in the field, you know that some of our largest funders are taking the corpus of their money and saying, we're gonna take this money and we're gonna put it out, and we're gonna put it out particularly for Black and Brown artists, led organizations, BIPOC-led organizations, and so that's the even that has been inspired by, you know, the mutual aid leadership that you all have really founded. So that's great. House of Art.
We're also now applying for grants to continue to support that work. We partner with our fiscal sponsor is the Center for Black Equity. And so we're like now also start to apply for grants to support our folks too. So if you see something from us, anyone out there, it's us.
That's it. Okay. Thank you for making that connection, because I think that there are some, I'm already thinking about a couple of foundations that should be investing in that. We should talk later. So any other examples from House of Garçon in terms of some of the advocacy work you're doing? I know that you were here for March on Washington and really hosted a number of things. Can you talk a little bit more about what you all have been doing?
Yeah, the House of Garçon prides ourselves on excellence on and off the ballroom floor. And so while we do our thing at the balls and compete and on the razzle dazzle of all of that, we are one of the few houses that has an entire advocacy arm, which is called CDG Pro. And CDG Pro is led by folks who their work is advocacy. And so, folks like Kenya Hutton, who's a program manager at CBE, Center for Black Equity, is a part of CDG Pro. Activists like Calvin Lavelle, who is at GMHC, and I can't remember where he's at now. Jason Walker, community organizer for Vocal New York. Jonathan Likes, who created Liberation House, but is one of the folks on the board, founding members of the board of BYP 100. And so we have all these, and if any of you all are watching, I'm not going to name all of you, but so many folks who like from all over the country who that advocacy is their work, whether it's around housing justice, whether it's around public health, whether it's around LGBTQ rights, that is an entire division of our house. And so they sort of like lead that work and like tell us what the thing is and the house moves, right? Yeah.
I did not know that. That's really great.
Yeah.
What do you think working artists need the most right now in the age of COVID, in the age of reckoning, in the age of all the stuff that's happening?
Working artists, what do they need? What do we need the most now? Wow, I don't think anyone's asked me that since all of this has started. Support. I mean, that one's sort of obvious, but that support can mean so many things. You know, there's obviously fiscal and financial support, but also, you know, I've read something recently where, and it's sort of a principle I've always operated and moved in, but just to like see it and read it somewhere, it's this idea, you know, that people just, everyone doesn't need advice or guidance, you know what I mean? Some people just need you to listen.
Yes.
And so I think, you know, artists pour out of themselves and create and make things and give and make space and send messages and raise the awareness and platform of so many different issues. And they give and they give and they give and they give. And so, you know, not enough people like give back to them. And yes, that means money, of course. And yes, that means, you know, supporting their work, but it also just means like making space to listen. If you have friends that are artists or family that are artists, like just sit down and listen, you know, it has been extremely helpful for me. I am one that like, I speak when I have something to say. And so oftentimes, you know, I am in spaces where, you know, this is a panel, so it's different, but like I'm in a room, whether it's virtually or in person, and I won't have much to say until I have something to say. But inside I'm holding all these thoughts and these feelings and these emotions, and those just stay there unless I self-care and write and get it out. Or I have friends and family who just ask me how I am. I take that question so seriously. Like when people ask me how I am, I'm not the person to just say, oh yeah, you know, I'm good. I pause and think about how I am in that moment. And I think that's, you know, it seems so small, but it's such a huge way to support artists. It's just listen.
Thank you for that. We forget that. You know, those who spend their time facilitating, supporting, creating space, lifting up. We think a lot of it is about money and like booking and, you know, opportunity, but there's not a lot of time for listening, and we're not always great at being active listeners. So
Exactly.
that's right. That's a really, really good reminder for artists that are, you know, trying to figure out how to survive right now because, you know, so many have lost work. I wonder if you have any advice for them, just drawing on your experience as a activist and the legacy of Ballroom, about, you know, how do you sort of use that energy to turn it into something that gives you a space and platform and maybe even inspiration to create your best work. What advice do you have for them, to fellow artists?
Lean in. I know so many artists and you know, myself included, who during this time when like maybe some things have shifted because of COVID, because of like safety protocols, because of, lean into the fact that you're an artist. Like you may be used to creating through one medium, but you are innately an artist. And so you can create through other mediums. And so I'll use an example. I have a friend in DC who's a dancer and a stepper, excuse me, but like amazing. Like he is amazing. And during this time, he's like toyed with the idea of painting and you know, over the years, but like during this time when he couldn't perform, he just sort of like leaned all the way in. And so when Beyonce, you know, came out with Black is King over the summer, he created a whole series from like
What?
based on the black. Let me turn this off just so you can see.
Yes.
Shameless plug, my friend. I'll turn this off just for a minute. But he made this, you
Wow.
know, and made a whole series. And so
Wow.
I would just say lean into your artistry. Lean into that space that you may not have explored or you've always wanted to explore. Like now is the time, right? To lean in.
Mhm. Thanks. Yeah, that's great. This is a yeah. This it's we're stuck in this holding pattern, but it doesn't have to be a holding pattern, right? It can be a place where you can sort of stand still and like listen to
Mm-hmm.
yourself, but also to each other to be able to respond to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about? I have some lists, but like, is there some things that we haven't talked about that you been on your mind?
Yes, I'm open to some audience questions. Let's just go for it. We got time, right?
We do have time. I would love to hear some questions from the audience. When I promoted this yesterday on social media, a friend of mine who is a total pose addict, she's like, I have a question. Tell him that Suzanne really loves this show and does he want to talk to me? But I'm like, I don't know if that's the right question, but got a lot of fans. Say hi to Suzanne. So send your questions if you have them. In the meantime, what's been the biggest challenge on the set?
Well, we're not back. Well, actually, it's exciting to say that we are officially back on set this week.
Yay!
So that's exciting. So I would say us not being on set because the show would have been out and in the world. Season 3 would have been out and in the world right now. A challenge on set. Wow. For me, and my role as a runway choreographer in season 2, at least, I'll like be very specific, is, earlier in the season, just like any project, you're like super prepared, like everything's running like on schedule, and then it's not. So later in the season, it goes from like getting scripts well in advance and rehearsing with folks and like being able to like plan to like at some points, just depending on the schedule, like literally walking on set, getting handed the side, like I'll know the category in advance, but like I won't know how the scene is, and like literally have to read it and like work with the people who are performing the category like in that moment, like choreograph on the spot and rehearse on the spot, and then we'll break and start filming. Like so those moments have probably pushed and challenged me the most, I would say.
Yes.
And literally sweating, but it helped me prove to myself what I can do. That I hadn't been put in that, level, that high stakes bit of a situation prior to those moments. And so that, I would say those were quite a bit of a challenge.
I can imagine. Oh my goodness. I mean, so most of the time you get everything in advance, and do you use obviously, I'm assuming you use the challenge and maybe just the storyline to inspire your own choreography, and do you have a chance to sort of sit with that beforehand, or what's your process when you're creating?
Yeah. So I'll know the categories well in advance. I'll know, and I actually help cast who's walking the categories, because we pull those people from the ballroom scene. So that those pieces I'll know. And in some moments I do more choreography based on how it's written. In other moments I do more movement coaching, because depending on who's cast, like they already they're known for the category, they walk the category, they're really good at it. So there's but so much actual like do this, as much as it is, getting folks from ballroom used to what it is to be on the camera, right? Like we're so used to improv in the ballroom scene that like when we walk a ball, we just go, right? Like, and it's just like something different up and down the runway, versus being on camera, we have to shoot the same thing from God knows how many different angles. And so you have to be like, repeat yourself. You have to know where the camera is. You have to know where to sell it, where to wink, and so a lot of what I do in some of those moments is more movement coaching than it is actual quote unquote choreography where I'm telling them to turn, you know what I mean? Or do a specific move. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. You know, and I'm curious about the balance of improv and choreography
Mhm.
on set. How much do you draw on the improvisation of your fellow artists and your own versus, you know, setting the choreography and thinking about the movement ahead of time?
Because, you know, our creative team, like the directors and producers are so specific, I choreograph more, way more specifically, I mean, way more often than the improv. Um, but I also know the strengths of the people who we cast for different categories. And so, you know, there is a balance there, but it is more choreo than improv. Yeah.
Spectre's really fulfilling too for you. You're
Yeah.
more fulfilling. We have a couple questions. One is from Miles, who's asked, are there silver linings to the forced break in action in 2020 in terms of advocating for a more equitable industry structure?
Are there silver linings? Gosh, I mean, I think yes. And I think for myself, and I hope for many other people, it seems that way, that it has caused such an abrupt pause, and not even pause, stop, and for so many things, that it has forced people into this introspective space around what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And that's, you know, in relationship to advocating for more equitable industry structure, but also just like, what are people making, period. And so, you know, it's definitely pushed me into a space of being way more clear about my role in all of this and my purpose in all of this, and what sorts of projects I'm willing to be a part of and not willing to be a part of, and even in those, what my role is, and not like credit role, but like, why is this project coming into my space? Am I supposed to be a part of this project? If so, to answer the latter part of that question, what is the advocacy toward a more equitable space for this project? Like, what does that look like for me to do? And I think the pause and all, and the stop of you know, that has been caused by the pandemic has really forced me to lean into asking that question more intentionally. You know, thanks to Kiki, thanks to Pose, thanks to the outlets and and the projects that I've been blessed to be a part of, I get a lot of requests for things. And so now I am, you know, that question is one of the questions that helps me decide whether I'm going to be a part of something or not. So absolutely, this has made me personally pause more.
Yeah, that clarity is really important right now. You know, when you're able to stop and decide that you can no longer do the things that are taking energy away from the things that you really care about.
Right.
So I appreciate that. Liz Cervantes runs an organization in Danville. It's an LGBTQ group in Danville. They brought drag to Danville and are increasing visibility, among other things. She wants to know if you or True Colors United would ever be interested in coming down there when the world opens back up to increase, you know, connection around these issues and advocacy.
Sure, let's talk. Whether it's me, True Colors, or even someone that makes the most sense. I'm always the one that, like, you should have the person that makes the most sense for what you want to do. And that's not always me. But if it is me, sure. And if it's not me, let's find out who it is.
That's great. Thank you. You're welcome, Liz. True Colors, what's going on right now? I mean, I'm not as familiar with that group, but I've always, I personally have a spot for homeless, particularly queer youth. Just I was in prepping for this and just learning about the percentage of suicide, the percentage of health access, you know, just, and I come from a family of public health people, at the forefront of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. So those two things around youth speak to my heart. And just curious about what's going on with that work. What are you doing with that work? How are they doing? Can you talk more about that?
Sure, yeah, that's interesting to know. We really have a lot in common. I actually come from before my work at True Colors. So, and I was, in a direct service providing organization in New York in Harlem for like 6 or 7 years before I came to True Colors. And I will say, just for clarity, True Colors United is not a service provider. So we're not a housing provider. We don't have drop-in centers, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, host homes. We don't do any service provision. We're mostly an advocacy organization and training institute. And so we do that through our 4 program areas. Our advocacy and public policy is mostly state and federal. And so at the state level, we have a national index that gives every state a score based on their youth homelessness policies and regulations on how inclusive it is of LGBTQ young people. And then we provide each state with technical assistance on how to increase their score, basically change the policies. And at the federal level, we've been a part of, tons of campaigns that have created and sustained protections for LGBTQ young people in programs that are federally funded. That's currently being under attack by this current administration. So we're in defense mode. So I'll say that and leave that there. In our training and education work, everything from toolkits to online trainings when outside was open, even face-to-face trainings we did at the service provider level, so individuals within organizations, at the community levels, so organizations and communities sort of like broadly is our focus there. That work is obviously still continuing to happen just virtually now. Our technical assistance is a bit more detailed, maybe not, that's not the word, not detailed. It's a bit more hands-on way that we provide technical assistance to communities. And right now that's specifically, our biggest technical assistance project is called the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. It's a huge sort of, I don't want to say experimental, but innovative project that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has done for the last 3 years. That gives communities who have HUD funding the opportunity to sort of like work outside of their usual way that they do their youth homelessness work. And in that work, we provide technical assistance to those communities to create youth action boards. So groups of young people with lived experience, expertise to create those youth action boards and train and involve those youth action boards in the plans that they create as a part of the demonstration project. And then lastly is our youth action work, which is the ways that we work directly with young people with lived experience. And so the first of those is called the True Fellowship. It's specifically LGBTQ young people, up to 7 every year that we work with for 6 months on an actual True Colors United project. And so they work literally with our staff on a True Colors project. And then the last of the youth action programs is something we created years ago, co-created with young people, the National Youth Leadership Forum on Homelessness. It's a group of 25 young people with all sorts of identities who all have lived expertise and experience from around the country. And they inform all of the federal policy work that we do, all of the sort of community work that we do, as well as their own body of work that they have sort of set up over the years. And so that's True Colors United. That's who we are. That's what we do. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And just for that education, I didn't realize the breadth, of the work and the advocacy, and also just the modeling of youth leadership, which I'm all about. And I wonder, are there intersections that you're finding between artists making creative art making and that work? I mean, besides obviously telling the stories.
I mean, I say this very often, but I'm absolutely sure that's like one of my reasons for existing in the world is to do that thing. It is no difference, the work of like true inclusion, right? Like this idea that folks who live an experience, that hold the identities, whether it's in the advocacy and the work that you provide services to people, or human and social services to people, or it's in the stories you tell about their lives, those people have to be at the table and not just present. They have to have decision-making power. They have to be involved in the story you're telling or in the grant you're writing. And so, those two things are not different. And that is the message that I try to leave with people, no matter what the project is that I work on. That's the thing, right? Like, how are you telling a story without the people that the story is about? Like, it just doesn't, whether it's doc, whether it's scripted, doesn't make sense. That idea of, the documentary is, very slowly, but starting to move out of this very like problematic colonial, outsider observing that you have to be an outsider for the story to be objective is ridiculous. Let's just leave it there.
How can it be authentic otherwise?
Which is the same in the advocacy and human services space, right? Like, because you have XYZ degree, or you've done this research, or like whatever that thing is, no discredit to that work, but how are you not working alongside the people who have lived it or are living the experience of the thing you're trying to work on? It just doesn't make it's not logical to me. And so that is my work, and all the things that I do and all the things I work on, like, that is the message.
Well, that's so important too, in that live performing arts community that I work in. Everyone is talking about, like, what does true inclusion look like, and how do we curate in a different way, right? Like, when we think about the things that we put on our stages, it has sometimes been sort of at a distance instead of sort of standing alongside community and saying, what stories do we need to share and cultivate so that not only you see yourself, but that you're a part of this. So I really appreciate that message. That's so important for all of us working in this continuum. I would like to ask a question about allyship. And I was just thinking about experience that I had when we came out with a conference that was called Transact. And it was named by somebody else prior to me joining the organization, but we were called out on social media saying, have you talked to the trans community? Are you like in connection with the trans community? And we got called out on social media a week before I started the job. And as a result, right, it's like, great. But that began my own personal journey of saying, one, we made a mistake, and two, how do we learn, and how do I partner, and how do I become an ally? And people have been amazingly gracious to help me understand how to be an effective ally, and what are the issues around, particularly around trans artists. Sean Dorsey being the first, trans U.S. modern choreographer that has a company, has been an enormous friend and helper to help me. But and Beatrice Thomas out in California, how can other people like me be better allies in the positions that we're in, and how do we use our positions to be supportive and help tell the stories in partnership with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, allyship is literally two things: ask and then take action. We do not live these, monolithic lives. We're not a monolith, right? And so, like, there is no blanket statement to answer that question. So no matter what community you are trying to be an ally to, the thing that there's two steps: ask that community what allyship looks like to them. What is the support that they need? How can you help? You have to be specific and ask them, which means you need to be connected to them and in relationship with them, and not sort of transactional, right? Like, it is an ongoing thing. And so I would say ask that. Another thing to ask is yourself what you know or what you don't know, and then to self-educate. It is not the burden of that community or that person to teach you what you need to know. Google works.
Exactly.
There's more than enough information out there. And it is okay to ask questions, yes. But it is not okay to like bear the burden, you know, for a community or a person to bear the burden of you getting baseline foundational knowledge about the community, like it's out there. So ask in both regards, what do they need? Ask yourself, what do you know? What do you need to learn? And then all of your action follows that. All your action follows that.
I set you up on that one because I wanted to make sure that that got out, and just wanted to sort of share that you know, my own story that maybe other people can relate to, just as we talk about stuff. So what's next for you? I mean, Kiki's out, like the show's been renewed. You've got this cool performing arts choreography project that I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about. But what's next in Ports with Pride or other stuff that you're working on?
Yeah, so like I said, post season 3, so I'll be busy with that until February. Simultaneously, Angelica Ross, who played Candy on Pose, got a development deal with Pigeon Inc., which is this production company that does really great stuff along Yana Fix My Life and some of and so I'm now working alongside Angelica at her company, Miss Ross Inc., as a producer and helping to develop the shows that she wants to make. And then the last thing that I am allowed to talk about, I think, is that I'm on the producing team for a documentary about one of the main characters from Paris is Burning. Her name is Dorian Corey.
Yes.
Yeah, she's if you've ever seen the doc, she's the queen in the mirror who just is sort of doing her makeup throughout the whole film.
Yes.
Who like define shade and reading and all of these words that people are using now. So I'm on the producing team with a bunch of amazing people who I can't name, who are going to make this doc. So that's what I got going on. Oh, and you said hometown. So funny enough, you say that a friend of mine, Jarrell, Gorgeous Gucci, he represented he is the father of the House of Gucci, but also he was on Legendary on HBO Max as the father of the House of Gucci.
Yes.
He's also from the 757. And so he and I and a number of folks who are like from there, who like have gone and moved and done that whole thing, are figuring out a way to do a Hampton Road. I mean, there is a Pride there, but like a way to collaborate that the folks who are doing that Pride to like do some really specific programming, obviously for Ballroom, but also just Black and Brown LGBTQ people specifically. So he and I started that conversation. We're starting to bring in our close friends and colleagues into that conversation before we approach the folks who already do the Pride. It doesn't make sense to, you know, we don't want to step on toes or disrespect anything that's already happening. I always move in a spirit of collaboration. So if you're on here or if you see this, we're coming your way. So.
Oh, that's great. This has been awesome. I've so enjoyed hearing you and talking with you. I hope I get a chance to meet you in person, and that maybe you'll show me a couple moves. So when I come out, like, and this has been great. Is there any final thoughts that you have? I think that we only have for a bit of time. Yeah. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with people about what we've talked about?
It's sort of my go-to, which is dream it, think it, say it, do it. Like, we truly, genuinely have the power to create our own realities. Like when I came into Ballroom, I was told, you know, you can never put this on your resume. You can't, like, this isn't going to take you anywhere. Guess what? So dream it, think it, say it, do it. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Twiggy and Krista, for sharing with us. This has been a wonderful conversation. And thank you everyone who attended for being a part of this. We hope that you'll join us for other Cities Rising events throughout the coming weeks. This week is focused on the arts. We have a session at 4 this afternoon featuring 2 directors of major art institutions who will be discussing how they're developing their organizational philosophy around inclusivity and community outreach. That will be followed by a meet and greet at 5 with Danielle Kristen Toussaint of the Aspen Institute for artists and support organizations who'd like to connect around these types of issues. So thank you again, and thank you to the Elizabeth Graham Firestone Foundation for making this possible. We will see you all soon. Take care.